over 2 weeks old, we're at 2.6. If you were to, I'm going to bounce back, and I'm just going to select San Juan County. And you can look at the data for San Juan County. You'll notice that it says we're at 23.3, and Kyle reported that we're at 18 cases. The state still has us at 19 cases. There's a case that's been assigned to San Juan County that is not our case. We need to work through the data system and get the state to remove what they call case 19 for us. That takes time, and it takes time for the data system to be updated. So if you look at the statewide data, it says we're at 19 cases. However, we are only at 18, and that is due to the reporting based on somebody's residency, not necessarily where they have been. And so during case investigations, we identify that an individual, let's say, has not been in the county for many, many months. However, their permanent residence is still listed as San Juan County, so they list it's initially listed as a San Juan County case. And so that is something we have to work through with the state. But you can see currently, and this is through June 28th, we are continuing to meet all of the goals that the state has established. Would like to just show you real quickly how that looks for our region. And so if I was to select Island County, you can see where they are at currently. They're in phase 3, and it looks like my computer, which I'm having trouble with this morning, is not going to update the numbers. So I apologize. I've been having issues with my computer, and it's not letting me select all the counties. But if I was to select all the counties in our region, you'll notice, I'll just go county by county. We won't do it for the region. You'll notice that Whatcom County, their rate per 100,000 is increasing. They're up to 63.5. Skagit County is at 31 per 100,000. Snohomish is at 36.6, and Island County is at 10.6. If you look week over week, in our region there, most of those values have increased over time. I want to jump over to the other data dashboard that we are looking at. This is more up to date, and again, the first one here is the hospitalization for the week. This is through June 28th. This shaded bar out here these numbers have not been confirmed, but it kind of gives you a snapshot. You'll notice that the low was about 2.2. So these are COVID-like hospital illness and hospitalizations due to COVID-like illness. On 6/14, we were at 2.2. And at 6/21, we're at 3.3. If you go back to 6/7, it was at 3.1. So it's remaining about 3% of hospitalizations due to COVID-like illness. If I was to go to the cumulative or the epi curves, this is what the state looks like. You'll notice that we had a peak back here in March of 447 confirmed cases. You'll notice that we're starting to see similar results of 434 in June as well. So we went up, we went back down, now we're going back up, which is what Kyle has reported is what's going on. Now, some people will say, well, that's because we're testing more. And so let me flip back over, and you'll see the increase in testing. So back in March, we were at about 4,000, 5,000 tests a day. Now we're over 10,000 tests a day. And the percentage of positives, which is another measure that folks look at, we're at about 4.2 positive, where if you go back into the early part of this, we were at 8.7. So yes, we are testing more. The percent positive rate is down, but the number of of folks who are being identified is starting to again reach where we were early in the disease, and so is it related to increased testing, or is it in an increase in just the activity of the cases? I'll let somebody else decide that, but what you can look at is you can see that we are starting to see more cases in the state, and we are seeing, again, there is more testing. If I was to look at, hopefully this one will work here, and look at the our region. So this is Island County. You can see that they are having these sporadic individual cases out here in June. Hopefully you can see that. So they had gone several days with no cases. Now they're picking up a case here or a case there. If I was to show you San Juan, you can see similar to us. This case here is the case 19. This is a case that, again, that we need to go through and get it assigned to the correct county. If you're looking at Skagit, you can see that they're bouncing as well. Not at the peaks that they were having early on. Snohomish, similar thing. They're actually seeing just a slight uptick, but not to the point where they were back in March. And then Thurston County or Whatcom County, they are seeing an increase in a surge, and so they went up, went down, and now they're back up. If I was to add in all the counties together and look at them as a whole for our region, you'll see a very similar bar where we're not at the peak of where we were at the end of March, where we were getting close to 100 cases in our region. Now we're down in the peak has been 68, and we've been averaging, say, if you probably average those out, in about 70. So we are seeing an increase in the last several weeks, but not to the level that we were seeing at the end of March, beginning of April. So wanted just to kind of show that to the council, and then just reiterate what Kyle has already said, is that our application was submitted last Thursday evening. The state has received it, and I know they are reviewing it. You can watch that. I also know that the majority of the State Department of Health staff were on furlough yesterday, and I don't know if that is what's caused the delay, but I'm hoping and optimistic that the application will be reviewed later today and or tomorrow, as Kyle indicated. So I'm going to leave these dashboards up and see if there's any questions in regards to the data that I just reported on.
Jamie.
I don't have anything, thanks.
I have none. And Bill doesn't either, and I do not as well. Dr. James is on the line, I think. Dr. James, did you have any comments you wanted to add? Okay, maybe not. Brendan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mark, I have one quick question. So, well, never mind. I'll save that for next week. All right. So is there anything else, Mark?
I don't have anything else, no.
All right. Well, at this point, we will move forward and to our next item. Thank you very much. All of you, appreciate all the hard work and dedication. You are doing a really great job keeping our community safe. So thank you very much. Our next item is a discussion with Ferry Service Update with Jim Corriman, Chair of the Ferry Advisory Committee. Jim, are you there?
I believe I am, Rick. Hang on, let me see if I can get the video running. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Rick, before we move on, it's Dr. James had something in the messages. I don't know if he couldn't get it unmuted or what.
He says his microphone is not working.
Okay.
We'll update later. Thank you, Jamie. All right, Jim, please give us the lowdown of what's going on with ferries.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Council. Good morning, everyone. Well, I'll just do the executive summary first, which is the service we've got is the service that we will likely have possibly until next spring. And let me go through the details. First, I want to put in a plug for WSF's public meeting late this afternoon. They've got a public meeting scheduled online at 6 p.m. There was a press release last week and there was a bulletin about this. I'm hoping that they will put out another ferry bulletin today because it does not seem to be very well publicized up to this point, but it's, I think, a good opportunity. It's going to be presented by Amy Scarton, Assistant Secretary, Head of Ferries, and go over through, the ferries view of much of what I'm going to talk about here. We've heard previously that ferries has four pillars or four metrics that need to be satisfied before they are able to add service. And first, of course, is ridership. Demand has been down. It is increasing. That's a surprise to exactly no one. As we move into our summer season and as we move toward relaxing some of the travel restrictions. The irony, of course, is right now we're still in phase 2, essential travel only. Many folks in the surrounding areas have transitioned to phase 3, where travel restrictions are less strict. But ridership alone is not going to get us more service. This is not a choose one of, it's choose most of. The vessels were limited. Ferries had to shut down their maintenance facility at Eagle Harbor. They had to cancel some yard dates because people couldn't work on the boats. One of the new 144s was hauled out at Bigger, had to be put back in the water, and has to be rescheduled. So there are still quite a few boats out, but they do have spare boats now, which they didn't have a few weeks ago. Biggest issue is crews. Ferry crews, they've talked for a long time about the aging workforce, the problems they have with hiring new crew. With COVID, they've had trouble training. They had to cancel their spring training session for new incoming crew members because of social distance requirements. You can't teach firefighting by Skype or Zoom. Simple. You got to be there in close quarters. So currently they have something over 100 regular crew members unavailable on medical leave because they're high risk, largely because of age, over 65, other underlying medical conditions. And this has put them right on the edge of being able to staff the reduced service that they currently have. We had a case a couple of weekends ago where they had to tie up a boat on a Friday because they simply didn't have enough crew to staff all 3 boats in Anacortes. They tied up one boat, took the crew from that boat, distributed among the other 2 to cover those shortfalls, and ran 2 boats. We abilited that this past weekend. They were again short. They took Clinton Mukilteo and also Edmonds Kingston from 2-boat service down to 1-boat service and rearrange the crewing. So that will continue to be a limitation as long as there are workplace restrictions and workplace recommendations for high-risk employees. Then lastly, the budget. As you probably know, the state's got a huge financial shortfall, particularly washed out, loss of gas tax money, loss of all kinds of revenues. I'm sure the county feels it too. That at the moment is not a limitation on WSF. They have their fiscal year budget, and the legislature has not yet met to change any of the budgets. But that's not an assurance that they'll have adequate budget going forward. Clearly, legislature, I think, is going to have to meet, rearrange some of the budgets, or the state's going to run out of money. So those are the four, what Ferris calls the four pillars, the rock and the hard place. So the bottom line is, I think the immediate goal is to keep the miserable level of service that we have and not let it get any worse. Just for a reminder, we're still on what has been relabeled as a COVID-reduced service schedule is in fact our winter schedule. It's 3.5 boat service. Springtime is 4 boats fully crewed. Summertime normally is 5 boats fully crewed. Footnote, one of those 5 boats spends most of its day going to Sydney, which is itself closed for the foreseeable future. But the 3.5 boat winter schedule is 4 boats on the weekdays in the morning, 3 boats Monday through Thursday in the afternoon, and then only 3 boats on the weekend. The inner island's tied up. And in the dead of winter, that's completely adequate. Covers all the needs. There is very little inter island traffic on the weekends, so not running the inter island boat is not an issue. We are in springtime, late springtime traffic levels, and those things are issues. We can carry more people in the morning than we can carry in the afternoon, except on Friday. There's no inter-island boat on the weekends, so all of our inter-island visitors are carried on the mainland boats. And if you sat and watched them load a mixed Anacortes inter-island sailing, it's a mess. Because on the inter-island boat, they're loading for 3 other destinations. They're good at it. They do it all the time. They've got enough lanes on the boat. This lane for Orcas, this lane for Orcas Talls, that lane for Lopez. When you've got a mainland boat and mainland traffic, there's no place to put all those different destinations. So they just got to work it out, which is the last problem with the winter/COVID schedule, is the dwell times are too short for all of this loading and unloading, and especially the inter-island nonsense, that they're going to run late. And we've seen it every day this week. Last week, the sandwich was, I think, up to 2 hours late by the end of the day. And that's a miserable situation for folks that are showing up on time for their reservation and waiting 2 hours to catch the 9 o'clock boat out of Anacortes to All Islands, which actually left at around 11 o'clock. And some folks didn't get where they were going until we're talking 1 o'clock in the morning. But that's our life. And I don't see, and the Ferries does not see any way to make it appreciably better. There are some proposals on the table for discussion. One of them, obviously, is a big help would be to run the inter-island on the weekend. And as crews become available, that is something that Ferries would like to do. And, we and we've got a helper with Bill Pike have been working hard on schedule suggestions for Ferries. It's their call at the end of the day. We're feeding them ideas. What if this? What if that? And for instance, one thing we could do would be add 1 additional crew watch for the inter-island on the weekend and run it single watch, not a commuter run because it's weekend. Start at 10 o'clock, run until 4 or 5 o'clock on a single watch. Minimum additional crew. Does require rearranging a bunch of other schedules, because now you're taking boats that are doing inter-island plus mainland, and you're going to let them run mainland. You're going to have an inter-island doing inter-island. So it's all the little pieces have to get rearranged, which can be done. The other option will be 2 crews on the weekend run a full inter-island schedule, and that means you could run the weekday schedule 7 days a week, and that would really, I think, simplify life for a lot of folks. The other thing you could do would be take the boat that ties up 4 days a week in the afternoons and run it in the afternoon every day and help move people. None of those are all on the table being looked at. None of them have the ability to be implemented right now because there aren't enough crew to do any of that. I think the other thing I got to point out is, lest we feel like we're alone in this, Bainbridge, which probably is the busiest route in the system, was downsized from 2 vessels to 1 vessel. Their traffic was down to 20, walk-ons were down to a mere 20% of what they were a year ago. Folks in Seattle are working from home. Bremerton is on single boat service from 2. Port Townsend, Coopville would be on 2 boat service. They're still on 1 boat service. Triangle should be on 3 boat service. They're running on 2 boats. They left Mukilteo, Clinton, and Edmonds, Kingston at 2 boat service because of the heavy traffic load there. Clinton's at the bottom of Vashon. Both of those routes are heavily traveled. But they were taken to 1 boat service 2 weekends ago, and Mukilteo was taken to 1 boat service this past weekend. Wait times for them were in up to 2 to 3.5 hours. We may look at that and say, well, gosh, we've got 5 hours between some of our sailings. What's the big deal? The difference is we have reservations, which in theory gives us space on the boat, and they don't. They just have to go sit and wait and crawl forward, sailing by sailing on the traffic lanes. So it's pretty miserable for everybody. I think, open to advice, I don't see any changes, any potential for changes right now until the virus defines itself a little better and a little more favorably, and some of the crews can get back to work. Longer term, I think I would advise council to stay in close touch with our legislators, because there will be budget discussions, I'm sure, coming up whenever they do a special session. And you guys all know all that better than I do. And I think lastly, my advice to riders is, number 1, make reservations. Don't think you can just walk down and hop on the boat and travel when you want. Even the bookend sailings, the 5:55 out of Friday Harbor, the late night sailings out of Anacortes are potentially going to be full. Monitor the bulletins. Ferries sends out service bulletins all the time. Get on the email list, pay attention to them. That's the best way to find out if there's service disruptions, like a missed sailing. Third, travel early. The boats are going to be late, so if you're counting on an afternoon sailing to get you to the airport on time, plan for the earlier sailing and find something else to do. Also, sailings may be canceled. There's been situations where 45 minutes before the boat's supposed to sail, somebody calls in sick. Some of the crew calls in sick, can't make it, and they've got to get a relief crew out there. Unlikely to be living in Anacortes, probably coming from elsewhere, and it's going to take them an hour to get to Anacortes. Miserable case 2 weekends ago, I think, there was a fatal accident on Discovery Pass, and crew lived down Vashon Island and couldn't get to Anacortes for hours because the Deception Pass bridge was closed. Things happen. So make a reservation, watch the bulletins, travel early. That's the best we can do from our point of view. Questions?
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Watson?
Yeah, hi, Jim. So is Eagle Harbor maintenance yard open back up, or is it still closed?
Yes, Eagle Harbor is back up with social distancing required, so they're not working as efficiently as they normally would. They've got 1 guy on a job instead of 2 or 3. Coast Guard is able to do some inspections. One of the issues is the annual inspection that they have to do for every vessel. Some of those came and went when they were closed. They're catching up on those. And Coast Guard is allowing them is being cooperative in the terms of doing a video inspection where the engineers will walk around with the cell phone camera, and the Coast Guard will tell them what they want to look at and tell them what tests they want to run. So that part is getting better.
Thanks.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, Jim, I had a couple of questions. Well, as you may or may not know, we're not going to get any new crew because the governor's put a freeze on all the hiring. And he's asked for a 10% reduction in every department and probably even more in WisDOT. I mean, that's just where they are on the budget stuff. And I'm just wondering, why are the boats so late? I didn't quite get that. It seems like the Samish is, I don't know if the Samish running late is throwing all the other boats, but the Yakima seems to be fine if it can get into a dock. Is it a deal with one of the boats or what?
Let me answer the budget question first. WashDOT, the Department of Transportation, has asked all of the non-essential employees to take a furlough day, one day a week off without pay. And that applies to ferries management and non-essential personnel also, and that's like a 20% cut. For boat crews and maintenance crews, they're all considered essential and they're exempt from the furlough. Folks that are on leave that are not working are subject to furlough. So there is a small incentive for them to choose to come back to work. The state, because they're high risk, the state cannot require them to come back if they're in a high risk situation, but there is a motivation there. But otherwise, ferries tells us that the rest of their budgetary funding is still in place. They don't know what's in the future. I think one thing I didn't mention that is important is all of the ferry management folks are working from home. And I think many of us are here to report that it is not the same as working together in an office, especially for ferries. There's no more water cooler conversations. There's no poking your head in the guy next door who happens to be the director of maintenance and say, what's up with this boat? It's all got to be much more deliberate. It much more depends on once a week management meetings. So we've seen from our point of view, ferries struggling with basic management decisions. It's gotten much harder for them. The Samish and the Yakima, if you look at the schedule, it has nothing to do with which boats on that position. The number 3 boat on the winter schedule suffers because it doesn't get to take the afternoon nap. If you trace the Yakima schedule, it does a morning run, and then I think it's tied up for 2.5 to 3 hours midday. You've seen it over in Anacortes. And then it goes back into service with the 305 to Orcas. And that's a reset for the schedule. So it will get behind in the morning, not a lot. And then it's got a time off to everything resets and catches up. And then it'll be on schedule in the afternoon, except that the other boats are late and space available at docks becomes an issue. Samish runs straight through. It starts, doesn't do the first sailing in the morning. It starts with the second round and runs straight through with no breaks. And every time they dock with a full load, it takes longer to unload and load than it is allotted for in the winter schedule. The winter schedule was intended to operate with lower average traffic levels. So if you have a 144 car boat with 80 cars on it, you can turn that puppy around in Anacortes in 20, 25 minutes. If it's a full load, it takes longer to unload, takes longer to load. And if you start throwing inter-island traffic or multiple destinations on that boat, it takes longer yet. So if you compare winter and summer schedules, your dwell times in the winter are 10, at Lopez are sometimes as short as 10 minutes. And the maximum would be 20 or 25. And a summer schedule would be 20 minutes out to 45 or 50 minutes in Friday Harbor sometimes. So the dwell time doesn't care whether it's summer or winter, it cares whether the boat's full. So when the Samish comes into Friday Harbor with 144 cars and a few hundred walk-ons, they can't do it in 20 minutes. Not going to happen. So every time they stop, they lose 15 to 20 minutes in schedule time. And at the end of the day, you're talking hours. And that's baked into the schedule.
Thank you. I've been wondering and got a lot of questions on that. So thank you. That clarifies it.
And we do have one idea that we're cooking in the back room for swapping boats in Anacortes in the middle of the day. In other words, switch Yakima and Sandwich during the Yakima's 2-hour nap and just reverse those two boats. We don't know if it can work in reality, but that's the kind of stuff we're trying to look at to see if we can make some of these special problems, get better.
And Jeremy, the dwell time issue was part of our problem with the spring schedule, or one of the factors in the spring schedule last year, why all the boats were so late. Again, we had increased traffic. Our schedules are designed, that like the winter schedule, it's slowly fills up as the schedule goes on. So there's less people riding the boat in the beginning of the schedule and more towards the end. The same thing with the spring schedule, because it carried over to mid-June last year.
Right.
The beginning of the spring schedule, it was on time, but it's interesting that they're making a schedule based on past traffic, not on capacity. And so, as Jim said, you can't turn these boats around. And now that we're maxing these boats out, we're going to continue to see delays because they're unrealistic dwell times.
Correct.
Jamie, any other questions?
Nope, thank you.
All right, Jim. Well, thank you very much. Let's just plan if there's any major changes to have you back in front of us again.
I will.
I did forward to council, or to Ingrid to forward to council, the information for tonight's meeting. I just realized I did have a copy of it for I think it's a Zoom call or Skype or webcast or something. So we'll hopefully be attending. Thank you very much for your time, and to the rest of the FAC. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Rick.
You guys want a break?
Yeah.
All right. So it's James. All right if we have a break?
Yeah, great.
So it's 10:08. Let's come back at 10:25. Thank you very much.